We must reject the politics of patronage. Politics should not be lucrative. We cannot have a new Nigeria if politics continues to be seen as a lucrative enterprise. With the Nigerian political class, it is a kind of endless churning of barefaced lies. And, we have examples of melodramatic lies, like, snakes eating, swallowing money. And I sometimes wonder whether we are a nation. We might be a country, but I wonder whether we are a nation, because a nation is an idea. But is a new Nigeria possible? Since the Nigerian presidential elections this February, I found myself on many days fighting off a cloud of despair, because the elections were so brazenly and horrifyingly mismanaged, and therefore destroyed the faith of so many Nigerians. But I do not ward off despair. I do actually ward off that despair with some effort, because I love this country, and love is persistent. And so I do believe that we can have a new Nigeria. I sometimes wonder whether we are a nation. We might be a country, but I wonder whether we are a nation, because a nation is an idea. A nation is an act of faith. And to become a nation, we have to believe in something that is bigger than ourselves. And I don't mean religious faith, which quite frankly, I think has often been desecrated at the altar of politicians. It seems to me that we need politicians to talk less about God and act more like God would want them to. But the only way to create this new Nigeria, I think, is through leadership. I remember when this present administration first came to power, a friend of mine who lives in Abuja said to me, and I suppose he was only half joking, he said, "People have stopped stealing. They're waiting to see if this anti-corruption thing is real." And I think this anecdote is telling in its simplicity. It just shows us that a leader sets the tone. We cannot have a new Nigeria if we continue to have the kind of leadership similar to what we've had in the past. We must reject the politics of patronage, the politics of personal interest, and instead embrace the politics that is people-centered. Politics should not be lucrative. We cannot have a new Nigeria if politics continues to be seen as a lucrative enterprise. And transparency should be the default. But instead, what we have now is a situation in which deception is the default. I've always been fascinated in the way that one is fascinated by something that's perverse, by how adept at deception so many in Nigeria's political landscape are. Yes, of course, we sometimes lie as human beings. Nobody's perfect. Hopefully, we don't lie too much. But with the Nigerian political class, it is a kind of endless churning of barefaced lies to a population that knows that it is in fact being lied to. And we have examples of melodramatic lies, like snakes eating, swallowing money, and politicians suddenly having doubles, but also the consequential lies that have a real impact on the lives of Nigerians. And this is the way that cynicism sets in. So many Nigerians are cynical about politics, cynical about government, and one cannot blame them. And so if we are going to have a new Nigeria, we need to make truth the priority. We need to say things as they are. We need to stop pretending. And maybe we could also take a leaf from the book and the spirit of late President Musa Yar'Adua. Now, here was a man who had the moral conviction to acknowledge that the system that brought him to power was flawed. And so this man, the late President Yar'Adua, actually set up a commission to investigate a system that had brought him to power. I think that speaks of a kind of moral courage that I wish we would see more of. But of course, it's also important to say that the panel that he set up, I think, had quite a few recommendations and none of them have been passed. And so a new Nigeria is possible only if we begin to refuse certain things. We must refuse to be desensitized. We must always keep our sense of outrage alive, alert. And then as an example, I want to remind us that we should continue, we should never stop being outraged by the fact that the Nigerian government turned guns on its own citizens who were merely asking for a better life. And of course, I'm talking about the NSAS protests. And maybe also one of the things we need to do if we are going to have a new Nigeria is that we need to, one of the problems I think that we have is a failure of imagination. And I think we see this in all facets of Nigerian life. So I go to get my hair done and I'm telling the hairdresser, well, I want to do it this way. And she says, no, Auntie, this is how we do it. So no imagination. Teachers, for example, are often unwilling to see imagination in their students. You follow one path and that's how it's done. We need to make sure that we set alight the imaginations of Nigerians. We need to say to people that they can dare to imagine something different. Things that exist today, the structures, the institutions, they haven't always existed. Somebody made them exist. And so we can, in fact, make things differently. And I think that Prof's life illustrates this and with such examples as when he was Attorney General of Lagos State. And I know this, by the way, because some lawyers spoke with such gratitude and enthusiasm about how Prof had made real practical changes to the judicial system in the state, one of which felt to me particularly people-centered because it was in creating centers of arbitration where people could actually sort out their problems without having to go to court. That to me is an example of a people-centered policy. And so, I'm going to conclude very soon, but a new Nigeria is possible because we actually see it today. And I say that because I believe that the Nigerian political landscape has been changed forever. And this was done by one man as a catalyst. One man was the catalyst, but actually it was done by the Nigerian people. And we see examples of this in the way that in different states in Nigeria, old school politicians were just completely swept away to their own astonishment, because I think in some ways they had felt entitled to their positions. And so these examples are small, but I think it shows what is possible, that we can in fact have a voice, we can in fact create change. And I'm also personally very pleased about Mrs. Ireti Kingibe, who is now Senator-elect from Abuja, who is another politician I hope and believe will do well because she also believes in telling the truth. And so a new Nigeria is possible also if we keep focused on the idea that there is gross inequality in this country. One of the things I think that the COVID period and the COVID lockdown showed the Nigerian elite was how precarious their positions are. And so it makes both a moral, but also a practical sense and practical reason to fight inequality, to try and make sure that, that yes, we know that there's always class differences, but it's too wide in Nigeria. Also believes in telling the truth. And so a new Nigeria is possible also if we keep focused on the idea that there is gross inequality in this country. One of the things I think that the COVID period and the COVID lockdown showed the Nigerian elite was how precarious their positions are. And so it makes both a moral, but also a practical sense and practical reason to fight inequality, to try and make sure that, that yes, we know that there's always class differences, but it's too wide in Nigeria.
Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.